Associate Pastor at Clemens Presbyterian Church. Our Lenten Book Club is reading the Gospel of John for the celebration of Easter, and we are pleased to have you join with us today. Today's reading is chapter 8, verses 1 through 20. It includes two stories which break midway, and I'd like to address them separately. In the first, we are still with Jesus, who is teaching in the temple in Jerusalem. Today's gathering also includes the chief priests and the Pharisees. This is a group that John doesn't include very often in his gospel. But they are bringing a case before Jesus, and what starts out as a crowd ends up with only two people. Listen now to what Jesus says about living in glass houses. From John chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. Early in the morning he came to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and he began to teach them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And making her stand before all of them, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with a woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on do not sin again." These are the words of the Lord. Thanks be to God. In the second half of today's reading, it is helpful to remember the historical context, which is the Feast of the Tabernacles. It is an autumnal feast that is celebrated annually to recognize the summer's grain harvest. It is also recalling Israel's journey through the wilderness after their exodus from Egypt. Lampstands symbolizing the light of God were a staple in the temple where Jesus is speaking. So listen now as Jesus connects himself as the light of God for all to see. From John chapter 8, verses 12 through 20. Again Jesus spoke to them, saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." Then the Pharisees said to him, "You are testifying on your own behalf, and your testimony is not valid." Jesus answered, "Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, because I know where I have come from and where I am going. But you do not know where I have come from or where I am going. You judge by human standards. I judge no one. Yet even if I do judge, my judgment is valid. For it is not I alone who judge, but I and the Father who sent me. In your law it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is valid. I testify on my own behalf, and the Father who sent me testifies on my behalf." Then they said to him, "Where is your Father?" Jesus answered, "You know neither me nor my Father. If you knew me, you would know my Father also." He spoke these words while he was teaching in the treasury of the temple, and no one arrested him, because his hour had not yet come. These too are the words of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The religious leaders of the day, though, remain in the dark. But we know now what they did not know then. which is that Jesus would defeat the darkness of death at the resurrection. In these uncertain times, it is profoundly comforting for Jesus to remind us that he is indeed the light of the world, and no one has ever or will ever be able to overcome it. Peace and grace to you in these days ahead as we approach the brilliance of the resurrection.